Kong Min-jae didn't flinch as the shards scattered across the polished stone of his penthouse office. His lieutenant, Park, stepped back instinctively, fear flickering across his weathered face. The other men around the table sat frozen, their expressions carefully blank. "Say that again," Min-jae said, his voice quiet as a knife drawn from its sheath. Park swallowed hard. "The shipment was intercepted. The Americans—" "I don't care about the shipment." Min-jae leaned back in his chair, the expensive leather creaking under his weight. At 32, he commanded Seoul's most feared criminal organization, with the cold efficiency of a surgeon removing a tumor. His tailored black suit cost more than most people earned in a year. His dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to a film star, if not for the absolute emptiness in his eyes. "I care that you're wasting my time with problems you should have solved before, bringing them to me." The room held its collective breath. Min-jae's gaze swept across the assembled men, and he felt the familiar contempt rise in his chest like bile. Weak, all of them. They feared him, yes, but they didn't understand him. No one did. That was how he preferred it. Emotion was a liability in his world. Love was a weapon your enemies could use against you. "Sir," another man ventured carefully, "your cousin is getting married next month. He asked if you'd bring someone to—" Min-jae's laugh was sharp and humorless. Marriage. Another cage people willingly walk into. He stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering Seoul skyline. "Let me make something clear to all of you. I don't do relationships, I don't do love, and I certainly don't date black chubby women." The casual cruelty of the statement hung in the air. Several men shifted uncomfortably, but others laughed, relieved to have the tension broken. Min-jae continued, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "My preferences are simple. Thin, Korean, obedient. If she can't fit through a narrow door or speak my language, she's not worth my time." He turned back to face them, his expression utterly indifferent to the prejudice dripping from his words. "Beauty has standards, gentlemen. I have no intention of lowering mine." Across the city, in a boutique hotel suite overlooking the Han River, Amara Okafor stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting the delicate gold chain at her throat. The hotel room was elegant, but understated, much like Amara herself. At 28, she had built a reputation as one of the most sought-after international business consultants in Asia, specializing in helping companies navigate cross-cultural partnerships and ethical restructuring. Her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant. "Car arrives at 7. The Choi Foundation Gala is Seoul's event of the year. You'll make quite an impression." Amara smiled, slightly, her dark eyes reflecting in the mirror. She knew what that meant. In rooms full of Korean elite, she would stand out. Her rich brown skin, her curvy figure, her very presence challenged the narrow beauty standards that dominated Korean society. She'd faced it before in Tokyo, in Hong Kong, in Singapore. The stares, the whispers, the subtle exclusions. But Amara hadn't built her career by shrinking herself to fit into spaces that weren't designed for her. She'd done it by being undeniably excellent at what she did, by carrying herself with a quiet confidence that demanded respect rather than begging for it. She reached for the red dress hanging on the closet door. It was a deep crimson, elegant and sophisticated, with clean lines that complemented her figure without apology. Not loud, not desperate for attention, but absolutely refusing to be invisible. The Choi Foundation Gala was held in one of Seoul's most exclusive venues, a modern architectural marvel of glass and steel that seemed to float above the city. Inside, Korea's most powerful figures mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, their laughter and conversation mixing with the soft classical music from a live string quartet. Min-jae arrived fashionably late, as always. He'd changed into a navy suit that cost more than a luxury car, his appearance calculated to project power and wealth. The gala was merely another chessboard, another opportunity to expand his influence. The Choi Foundation, officially a charity organization, was actually a convenient front for laundering money and forging alliances between legitimate business and the underworld. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting greetings with minimal acknowledgement, his handshake brief and perfunctory. Everything bored him: the forced smiles, the obsequious conversation, the women who threw themselves at him, hoping to become the one who could tame the infamous Kang Min-jae. He was nursing a glass of expensive whiskey, half listening to a politician drone on about infrastructure projects, when the murmur in the room shifted. The main doors opened, and Amara walked in. She didn't make a dramatic entrance. She simply arrived, her posture impeccable, her expression serene. But something in the room changed. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. The red dress moved like liquid fire as she walked, her natural grace making the movement seem effortless. Min-jae found himself staring before he could stop himself. She was everything he'd claimed not to want. Her skin was dark and luminous under the chandelier light. Her figure was full and unapologetic, curves that the dress celebrated rather than hid. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased the graceful line of her neck, and yet he couldn't look away. "Who's that?" he asked, interrupting the politician mid-sentence. The man followed his gaze and smiled knowingly. "Ah, that's Amara Okafor, Nigerian-American consultant. She's here, working with the Kim Corporation on their international expansion. Brilliant woman, from what I hear. Turned down 3 different marriage proposals from wealthy businessmen in the last year alone." Min-jae's jaw tightened. He told himself it was merely curiosity. She was an anomaly, that was all. Interesting in the way a rare painting might be interesting. "Introduce me," he said. Amara was speaking with the Choi Foundation's director when she became aware of someone approaching. She'd felt eyes on her since she arrived, nothing new there. But this gaze felt different, heavier, more intent. She turned and found herself facing one of the most striking men she'd ever seen. He was tall and lean, with the kind of aristocratic features that seemed carved from marble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark and fathomless, studying her with an intensity that bordered on predatory. "Miss Okafor," the politician said, slightly nervous. "Allow me to introduce Kang Min-jae. He's a prominent businessman here in Seoul." Amara extended her hand, her smile polite but reserved. She'd heard the name, of course. Everyone in Seoul's business circles had. Kang Min-jae wasn't just a businessman. He was a ghost who walked in daylight, a criminal empire wrapped in expensive suits and legitimate investments. "Mr. Kang," she said, her voice warm but professional. "A pleasure." His handshake was brief, his palm cool against hers. "The pleasure is mine. I don't believe I've seen you at these events before." "I don't attend many galas," Amara replied smoothly. "I prefer to spend my evenings working or reading. But the Choi Foundation does important work." Something flickered in Min-jae's eyes, amusement or irritation. She couldn't tell which. "Important work. Is that what we're calling it?" The politician laughed nervously and excused himself, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to unfold. Amara tilted her head slightly, studying Min-jae with the same calm assessment he was giving her. "I'm sorry. Was that supposed to be cynical or knowing?" "Perhaps both." He took a sip of his whiskey, his gaze never leaving her face. "These charity galas are rarely about charity. They're about power, connections, money changing hands beneath smiles and champagne toasts. And yet you're here," Amara observed. "I never claimed to be above it. At least you're honest about your hypocrisy." The words hung between them, sharp and clear. Around them, Several people had gone quiet, shocked that anyone would speak to Kang Min-jae with such casual dismissal. For a long moment, Min-jae simply stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes, but it transformed his face nonetheless, making him look younger, almost human. "You're very direct," he said. "I find it saves time." Amara's expression remained pleasant, unbothered. "If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with." She walked away without waiting for his response, leaving, Min-jae standing alone with his whiskey, and a feeling he couldn't quite name churning in his chest. No one walked away from him. No one. Over the next hour, Min-jae found himself tracking Amara's movement through the gala. He told himself he was merely observing, professionally curious about this woman, who seemed so utterly unimpressed by wealth and power. She moved through the crowd with easy confidence, her conversations animated, but never loud, her laughter genuine when it came. She was standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Seoul skyline, when he approached her again. "The view is better from my office," he said. Amara glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. Is that supposed to be impressive or an invitation? Can't it be both? It's neither. She turned back to the window. I've seen enough penthouse views to know they all look essentially the same. Height doesn't make something beautiful. It just makes it distant. Min-jae felt irritation spike through. Him. Why did this woman keep challenging him? Why did she refuse to play the game everyone else played? You don't like me very much, he observed. I don't know you well enough to dislike you, Amara replied evenly. But I don't particularly like what you represent. And what do I represent? She finally turned to face him fully, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. Power without purpose. Wealth without wisdom. A man so convinced of his own superiority that he's forgotten how to be human. The words should have made him angry. Instead, they did something worse. They struck something deep inside him, a place he'd buried so thoroughly, he'd forgotten it existed. You think you know me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I know men like you. Amara's voice was gentle, almost pitying. I've met them in every city I've worked in. They think money and fear are the same as respect. They surround themselves with people too afraid to tell them the truth, and they die lonely, wondering why their empires feel so empty. Before Min-jae could respond, an explosion of sound shattered the elegant atmosphere. Screams erupted as gunfire crackled through the air. The massive windows facing the street spiderwebbed with cracks. Min-jae's instincts kicked in instantly. He grabbed Amara's wrist and pulled her down as another volley of shots rang out. Around them, guests were diving for cover, security personnel rushing toward the sound of chaos. This way, Min-jae commanded, pulling Amara toward a service entrance he'd noted when he arrived. Always know the exits. It was a rule that had kept him alive this long. They burst through a door into a narrow service corridor, the sounds of panic muffled behind them. Min-jae's mind was already racing, calculating. This wasn't random. Someone had targeted the gala, which meant they'd targeted the people inside, which meant they'd targeted him. Are you hurt? He asked Amara, his tone clipped and professional. She shook her head, her breathing rapid but controlled. No. What was that? Assassination attempt, most likely. He pulled out his phone, sending a rapid text to his security team. We need to move. This corridor connects to the parking garage. Who are they trying to kill? Does it matter? Min-jae glanced at her, noting that despite the fear in her eyes, she wasn't hysterical, wasn't falling apart. We're both in danger now. They moved quickly through the service corridors, Min-jae's hand still wrapped around her wrist. His touch was firm but not painful, and Amara found herself struck by the contradiction. This man, this criminal, was protecting her. They reached a storage room, and Min-jae pulled her inside, locking the door behind them. The small space was filled with cleaning supplies and extra linens, barely enough room for both of them to stand. "We'll wait here until my men secure the building," Min-jae said, releasing her wrist. Amara leaned against the wall, her heart still pounding. In the dim light filtering under the door, she could see Min-jae's profile, sharp and aristocratic. His breathing was steady, his posture alert but relaxed. "This is normal for you," she said quietly. "Violence. Danger. It's part of my world. What a terrible world to live in." Min-jae looked at her then, really looked at her. In this small space, he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. Could see the pulse hammering in her throat, the way her hands trembled slightly even though her voice remained steady. "Why aren't you more afraid?" he asked. Amara's laugh was soft and slightly bitter. "Mr. Kang, I'm a black woman who built a career in countries where people who look like me are often treated as curiosities at best, threats at worst. I've been underpaid, overlooked, insulted, and underestimated more times than I can count. Fear is something I've learned to function through." Something in her words struck him with unexpected force. He'd never considered what it might be like to move through the world carrying that kind of weight. His power, his privilege, had always been assumed, never questioned. "That comment I made," he said suddenly, "at the beginning of the evening, about not dating women who look like you." Amara's eyes met his in the darkness. "I heard." "How?" "One of the servers overheard your men laughing about it. Word travels fast in spaces like these." Her smile was sad. It wasn't surprising, just disappointing. Min-jae felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Shame. "I was wrong." "Yes, you were." Amara didn't let him off the hook, didn't make it easy. "But the question isn't whether you were wrong, it's whether you're capable of being better." They stayed in that storage room for 20 minutes, waiting while Min-jae's security team swept the building. The conversation that unfolded in that small, dark space was unlike anything Min-jae had experienced in years. Amara talked about growing up between two cultures, never quite fitting into either. About building her career through excellence, because mediocrity was never an option for someone who looked like her. About learning to value herself in a world that constantly told her she wasn't valuable enough. And Min-jae, to his own